Let's talk about 3 guidelines for choosing homeschool curriculum. Guidelines, because they're not strict rules. And I'm not going to tell you where to buy curriculum or borrow curriculum or even if you need curriculum. But if you do, here's 3 guidelines for choosing homeschool curriculum. First thought I have is at the last conference that I was at, I bought homeschool curriculum in the vendor's hall and I didn't buy a thing. Why? Okay, here's 3 possibilities. A, I was no longer homeschooling. Obviously know the answer to that one. B, I was already in possession of enough books to occupy a public school library. Or C, I was homeschooling 10 years at that time and I have learned that I just don't need it all, which is B and C. I definitely have enough books to occupy a school library at this point, and C, most definitely I have learned I really don't need everything. Now, do I buy stuff? Yes, I do. In fact, I just pulled a couple of bags from my closet. It was like it was Christmas to the homeschool room here, the homeschool room. And my son asked me, hey, what's that? And I said, you can't find out because it isn't school yet. And I spent an afternoon in town, local choices. I purchased a bunch of stuff that I am hoping that we can use this year. Now, having said that, I have learned a couple things about buying stuff. One is that I really don't have to buy stuff to make an education. I really do believe that, and I use a lot of stuff I don't buy. I happen to have one homeschool child this year, so I have resources to use for one child instead of a whole bunch of kids. And I also know what my kids, or what this guy really likes doing. I know the kinds of things he's interested in, he's drawn to, and I'm going to show you because they are, some of them, typical things that you might think I would buy, but there are definitely some unconventional schoolish curriculum choices. But first, I want you to know that one of the number 1 question that I get about homeschooling, you know what that question is. It's the S question, or at least it was until last year. But I'm also asked, are you a teacher? Well, yeah, but not like a teacher that would go to a school. But the last question is, where do you get curriculum? Where do you find it? And I always find that's a really funny question because, like, the same places that you buy books, the same places that you find books to borrow, toy stores, friends, online, all the places. There's a lot of places. And really, if you ask pretty much any Facebook thread or Facebook page about their favorite curriculum on math or science, or you fill in the blank, they will give you dozens of ideas. There are lots of possibilities, and you can find things a whole bunch of places. Now, even the most exciting curriculum, though, it doesn't matter what it is, it gets boring after a while. If you use it on repeat, if you have more than one child and you use it on repeat, or pretty much anything gets boring by the middle of November before Christmas, and about the January, February slump month, everything is boring then. So it doesn't matter what you can buy, you will get bored of curriculum. So something that you think looks enticing at a certain point, even a child really likes it in the store. And then they spend 20 minutes doing it and they're good, even though it costs you a lot of money. So be encouraged. You're not going to find the perfect curriculum. You're not going to find curriculum that you use for all the kids. And you don't have to spend the most money on curriculum to get a really good educational opportunity. So the perfect curriculum doesn't exist. You need to hear that before I share the 3 guidelines. There's no magical curriculum. So if there isn't, if that doesn't exist, then what are the guidelines for purchasing or borrowing or using curriculum? Here's my thoughts. Follow their interests. That's the first guideline. Does it fit their interests? Well, I'll tell you that the hardest way for you to enact an education in your homeschool is to choose something that they don't want to do. But you know that already. And yet when you follow their interests, it's the easiest way. It also doesn't feel forced, and it definitely doesn't feel like a sit-down school time, which maybe you want it to feel that way because then you feel like you're really doing homeschool. Except let's go back to what is an education anyways, and is it really about trying to make you feel like you're doing school at home? Or is it really trying to enable a child to raise up and become who they were meant to be. So create an education specifically to them. For instance, I have something that I purchased that I know for sure is in the bandwidth of my son's interests, and it is Leonardo da Vinci's, I don't even know what we call this or how to pronounce this, a Trebuchet. Pretty cool. Okay, so this says it's intended for a child of age 14 plus, which means nothing for my 12-year-old son who really loves hands-on mechanical engineering kind of stuff. It's obviously it's in medieval times. Leonardo's take on the most powerful weapon of that time was his design used one main mast, different from all the others. It was a weapon that kind of reminds me of, I don't know, it's the medieval times anyways. I'm not big into learning all about Leonardo da Vinci's, all the things that he's done, but I have been in a museum that honored all the scientific things he's done, and he's done a lot more than paint the Sistine Chapel. And my son loves this stuff. Anything that's building beyond Lego, beyond Minecraft, there are so many different things that you could find out there that would facilitate their interests. And so and I know this from years of experience, that the easiest way to engage kids is to start with their interests. So something that I just showed you, that could become a discussion when we're discussing history. We could read historical aspects of that, or some more science or more discussion on what Leonardo da Vinci actually did discover or what he did. You have a kiddo that has an interest, you can find a lot of different ways to incorporate their interests and create learning opportunities around it. Maybe we find a quote that Leonardo da Vinci said, because a lot of the artists do say some very clever things, and then we could write that quote as part of cursive if that's a valuable thing for you. Or you could create a lab book about all the different things that he discovered or what was going on in that time period. So really you can start with their interests, and that is the first guideline that I would tell you, is always start with whatever they're interested in. But the second guideline I would say is also to follow your interests. So who says homeschool always needs to focus on the child? Now, obviously, that is why we started this thing. That's usually what the intention is, but it often becomes a family affair. Homeschooling becomes a full educational family affair. Everybody learning together or sharing the things that they're most passionate about. So for me, gardening, writing, homesteading, I've incorporated my interests for years with the kids. And, in spring planting, actually, that's something that we used to do all the time together. Charlotte Mason, our springs, and I loved it. I loved the experience with the kids and just being outside and enjoying the great outdoors, having a reason to study botany. I loved it. And then eventually my kids grew up and they didn't like going outside to the garden with me. And that was okay, because it became my quiet space, and it was a useful place to be as well. But they learned a lot by osmosis. They still hear me talking about all sorts of different things. One of my girls was asking me the other day, what is in the garden, fresh in the garden right now? And it's about to be eggplant and green beans. I've had a whole bunch of raspberries and strawberries and tomatoes and peppers and edamame, soybeans, all sorts of different things. So those interests are always maintained in our home. And for my husband, he's got generally more academic interests than I do. And I wasn't sharing all my interests. I have many, and I've fostered more because of homeschooling and dipped into things because of homeschooling. But my husband has interests in history and economics and politics, even before this last year, and Broadway history, presidential history, all those things. And really, he's able to connect in with the kids in a way that shares his passion. And if you remember the things that you loved the most about your teachers in school, the ones that you really enjoyed, they were the ones that also loved what they were talking about. And they were just enlivened when they shared something. And you learned from them because they cared. And that's the same with you. You don't have to be a teacher in order to do this. You have to be a parent that cares and cares to share about their passions and use that as a jumping off point in our kids' education. So, having said that, there is something that I purchased that I really love that we're going to do together because I really love it. Certain books. Have you read The Mysterious Benedict Society? Well, we haven't read this one. It's called And the Riddle of Ages by Trenton Stewart. And I'm pretty sure it's just become a Disney movie too, of course. And it is a really fun book. This is the second. I think I saw 3 of them. So reading together is one of my favorite things to do. And if I've learned anything about homeschool moms, it is that we love to read with our kids. So for him, I even got him a discount clearance $4 My Reading Logbook, so he can actually write down the books that he's read this year. And that's something that I actually do on Goodreads all the time. Why? Because I'm old and I like books. I don't know. I think it's fun. For him, let me see here. I've also got something called, it's a book by Padma, Venkatraman, The Bridge Home. Readers will be captivated by this beautifully written novel about young people who must use their instincts and grit to survive. Padma shares with us an unflinching peek into the reality millions of homeless children live every day, but also infuses infuses her story with hope and bravery that inspires readers and stays with them long after turning the final page. One of the reasons that I love film and reading aloud with my kids, or just reading period, is to get inside the mind of other people and experience what it's like to live their lives. And I've got lots of experiences in my background, as we all do, but being a homeless child is not one of them. So I'm hoping to explore that experience with my son. The other thing I have in here somewhere is a drawing book. Let me get that. Nope, can't find it. It is essentially a drawing easel, one of those pads of paper you can put up on an easel and do some drawing or artwork. I love that. It's not in my natural repertoire. When I was in kindergarten and I was asked to draw something, I drew an electrical pole, which looks like the cross. That's all I could draw. And I couldn't conceive that I could go beyond that, but I've learned actually that just as your brain can learn math concepts, if it's not naturally math adept, you can also learn all sorts of drawing concepts. And so it's something that I have really built a passion for. And I've seen especially 2 of my kids really deep dive into that one. And frankly, there was one day I was putting together all the different papers and separating all the things that the kids had done last year, the 2 homeschooled kids I have this last year. And I had pulled out one picture, which happens to be right here. And I thought that it was something that my older daughter had drawn, but it wasn't. It was what my younger son had drawn. And they just have a skill that I definitely didn't have then, but I love sharing that interest in drawing. And it's something that we often do when we're doing read-alouds. But another thing that I purchased was this book called Art Through the Ages, a seek and find book. And so you learn about art history, and at the same time you gain the kids' interest. You can see this kind of a page. It's kind of like a Where's Waldo book. And it's a pretty busy kind of book, but there's a lot of little snippets about, say, this is the time of cathedrals. After the Roman Empire came the Middle Ages, which kind of works together very well with that Leonardo da Vinci package that I had. And this is more of my interest, but I think, wouldn't that be cool if we could explore some of that together? And so we will. Also, flags of the world. I think this is just fun to know this, just like geography. Actually understand where different places are. Here's a map of South Africa, or Southern Africa. So there's a variety of nations in here. And when we were in rural Africa for a couple times, we did geography study, obviously, but we also actually did it in book when we had maybe 20 minutes to an hour in the afternoon of quiet together, and we would study African geography. And I still don't have all the flags memorized, no surprise there, as they definitely are not easy to memorize. But there's these little stickers in this Usborne book that you can actually take the stickers off and place them on the right continent in the right area. And I really just find that interesting. Okay, so then I've got also this survival science kit, and I don't know how advanced, or probably not that advanced this is, but it's just a something fun thing to do that really is an exploration of outdoors. And since we definitely have a lot of great outdoors, and we have learned all sorts of things about survival when we've moved to this place in the mountains, my son has a real interest in it. And so this specific one is Kids Lab Survival Science Kit, and it helps you build a sundial, a telescope, a water purifier, Morse code, you know, all the things that kids love. Something like this. Yeah, it can be an hour of activity or maybe 2 hours of activity, but it can also become a discussion about how to actually survive, how you should not end up on your own in the forest by yourself, or why do we need to do water purifying, or let's talk about climate change, or let's talk about all the different elements of how to create enough water, clean drinking water for people in the world. There's all sorts of potentials for jumping off in that kind of a discussion. And so those are his interests, those are my interests, but no matter the interest that you have, you can incorporate it into some sort of engaging learning opportunity in the day. And when they watch you passionately engage your interests, they naturally do it too. There's no need to cultivate a lifetime of learning interests. They just see you do it, and you give them time and space and opportunity to do it, they will do it. And the third guideline I had was to trust the way that they like to learn is the way that they should be learning. It's the right way to learn. You will not be given a manual for how they like to learn or what they like to learn in the beginning of their days. In fact, it will have gradual shifts in, you know, how they learn and what they like to learn over the course of time. It doesn't stay static anyways, but your goal is to help facilitate it or help to encourage it, instead of say, you know what, this is how the schools do it, so we're going to do it this way too because other people are doing it that way, or I see this new curriculum that everybody's using, so I think that maybe we should do it that way because other people think that's valuable, or I really like it when we sit down at the kitchen table together, that makes me feel like you're learning. If it really isn't working for him or her and they would rather do, say, times tables while jumping on a giant inflated ball, then do it their kinesthetic way, because it is the right way for them to learn, which obviously influences the actual use of curriculum that you choose. It will influence your choice of curriculum. And frankly, this whole thing, this whole discussion will make your life a whole lot easier if you're using these guidelines when you are choosing curriculum. Because if they're engaged, all of your lives are a whole lot easier and simpler. And as you and I both know, we're both probably likely taught in a very conventional educational approach. We regurgitated things after we were lectured, we recorded things, we studied things, we spit it back out, and that was the approach to learning. Sometimes that's an approach that still works for some kids. I had one of those, and I often hear that other people have one of those. And great, you're very familiar with that approach to learning, so encourage that. If they like to do it that way, you can also do it that way. And you can find all sorts of curriculum to fit that approach to learning. But pretty much every other way of learning, it can be accommodated by your choice of learning. So these modes of learning have their place. Being told something, writing something on paper, reviewing it, and being quizzed, sometimes it does have a place in our kids' learning. We've all been taught that we have preferences in learning styles, and I think that we definitely have natural preferences, but instead of focusing on what is the learning style, try to facilitate what is going on with your child right now. How are they engaging things right now? And be present with them in it right now. If you want to learn more about learning how to learn, check out Barbara Oakley's book on learning. I think it's called How to Learn, but you can check that out on my Homeschool Mama reading list in the link in the bio. And she can also be found on YouTube. Somebody that you definitely want to learn more about learning with. She'll give it to you straight and help you understand how kids actually absorb things. So check that out in the Homeschool Mama reading list, and know that we are once a month going to offer a Homeschool Mama reading club or a book club where we can join together and we can talk about influencer or a homeschool book or just a significant author that a lot of people know and how it can actually influence our homeschools. And I invite you to that. This next one will be about how Brené Brown influences our homeschools, and I think it's on September 30th, Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you want to join, you can find the link in my bio. Make sure that you go through the full registration. There is a $5 registration fee, so make sure that you've got that, and you'll have a Zoom link sent to you the morning of the Homeschool Mama Book Club. So to wrap up, 3 guidelines for how you can facilitate curriculum in your home, or how you can choose curriculum for your homeschooled kids, is to follow your child's interests, follow your interests, and learn how they learn. But really, you're going to trust how they learn. Become comfortable trusting who they really are, how they're actually learning right now, and help facilitate how they're learning right now. If you've got more questions or comments, then please put them in the comments down below. I'd be happy to engage them afterwards, and I hope you and your kids are having a charmed homeschool week. We'll talk to you soon.